tonight. I am John Maddox, your host, joined as always by the best co-host in all the land. We'll start with our gentleman friend from the New York office of TigerSportsReport.com. Mr. Moss, how are you this evening?
Good. How you doing?
Where's the hat, man? Where's the
Oh, that's right.
channel? Yeah, all right. Well, yeah.
There we go.
We can't have you without the official hat of
Yes.
TigerSportsReport.com.
There you go.
Oh, I just lost the coach's name. It was right at the Bruce Arians. Channeling Bruce Arians this evening. And it's time, ladies and gentlemen, for our favorite game. Where's Larry Marley?
I'm in Charlotte tonight, and I just left downtown. And for those of you who have ever been, it actually is a beautiful city. Love visiting Charlotte, and if you ever get a chance to come over, I would not recommend going to the University of Charlotte football stadium. That's not the best part of Charlotte, but the rest of the city is absolutely gorgeous. So put that on your bucket list because it actually is a lot of fun.
I believe they fight with Cincinnati for being the Queen City, right? I think those two fight over that. Well, Charlotte has
named after an actual queen.
Well, Charlotte has better chili right off the bat, so they're the winners. And
better beer, I can say that.
In addition to all that, it's our favorite. It's the most wonderful time of the year, gentlemen. It is game week. Finally, we've made it. Our long national nightmare is over, and we are in game week. We are in the throes, as they say, of game week. Had press conference today. Talked to Tom Cramsey. We'll play a snippet from him today. And so, Bryan, week 1 against North Alabama. What are you looking for out of the Memphis Tigers this week?
Just consistency. Since it's North Alabama, I know the coaches was like, I think Silverfield said, we have to be, on top of our game, or else, I think he said something like we'll be in trouble, or they can challenge us, or whatever he said. To me, that's just coach speak. I mean, to me, it should be a bloodbath. There's no way, shape, or form should Memphis and North Alabama be close. I'm just looking for consistency. I want to see how this offensive line gels. It's an older offensive line. I think it's the oldest offensive line as far as, because I think there's 3 seniors, redshirt junior, and a sophomore, if I'm not mistaken, or 2 juniors and 3 seniors. So it's a more experienced and offensive line. So I want to see them dominate. Consistency and domination is really what I want to see, and I think that's what we'll see.
Larry, what are the big things you're looking for out of this game?
So defensively, what I want to see is everybody staying on assignment. Assignment football, not making mistakes, not letting receivers behind you. Keep them in front of you. This is a game where you're bigger, you're faster, you're stronger. You just want to play vanilla, basic. So let's go out and run a basic 4-3, run it all game, and run it to perfection. If you do that, that's what you're looking for here. Nothing's fancy.
Yeah, I don't think this is a week where you have to kind of show anything. Obviously, this is going to be a lot of zone read, maybe a couple RPOs and a couple deep shots, and we get the heck out of Dodge, and we get no one hurt. As I said earlier, we had a chance today to talk to offensive coordinator Tom Cramsey, and the question I asked was
Tim Cramsey. Sorry.
Tim. Sorry, I don't know why I've always called him that. You have the good problem that a lot of teams would love to have, where you have so many skill players. How are you going to get all of them the ball?
When the ball comes your way. We got one ball out there. We got a lot of people who can make plays. A lot of people who are good with the ball in their hands. As I've said from the get-go, it's their job as players to prove to us as coaches they deserve to be on the field. And then it's our job as coaches to find a way to get them on the field and get the ball in their hands where they can maximize their skill set and be successful. One thing we are overly preaching this year is selflessness, camaraderie, the one goal. So right now, no player in this team is selfish in the sense of I need this many touches. They understand if they get a lot of targets and get a lot of touches in the game, that's because I feel they're in playing good ball. If they're not, then they got to play better ball in practice, and that's the way it works. That's the way it is, and that's the professional we have, and the professionalism of the guys on this team.
So I thought it was, what I picked up there, Larry, was there was a lot of talk about professionalism and how, I think I might be overthinking this a little bit, but this feels to me like with that type of statement, how somebody like Ryan Silverfield, who's been in the NFL, knows kind of how a professional thing works. When you have a team that's kind of in the position of Memphis this year, where big things are expected of the Tigers, and you've got so much talent, it does really, Bryan, in some ways come down to professionalism, right? Like it comes down to going about your business a certain way.
Yeah, and I mean that's the way Silverfield loves to operate this program, and I'm all for it because it's the way college football is going, and I think I said this last week, is more of an NFL model. Kids are being paid. Well, if you're going to get paid, you better, it's more. You got to act like a professional athlete because you're getting paid now. There's no, in my opinion, there's no more amateurism in college football. So if you're getting paid, this is your job, and you should act like it. And just like a real job, if you don't perform, they'll find somebody who will. And in a real job out there in the real world, you got to act professional. You don't act professional, you're not going to have a job. And so in some ways, I'm going to miss the old college football, but in some ways, I really like this new college football because it's more professional like than it was before.
Well, so
that's
you go ahead, John. I'm sorry.
That's something I think we talked about a couple of years ago on the podcast, that the new hottest title in college football is going to be general manager or director. Everybody calls it something, DPP, director of player personnel. But Larry, I find it interesting that in the past, coaches, would not have said it that way. They'd have said, well, we're in this for a team, and the guys are ready to go. But if you saw the video, he emphasized professionalism, and I think that is one of those things that trickles down, right? It comes down from the head coach, and
Larry, well, I think you're right. So here's how I would interpret that. I don't think you're overthinking it. I think you nailed it, and Bryan actually said it best. The coaches are looking at this like, we're getting paid, you're getting paid, we're all trying to make this work together. And it's no different than when I am training a young person to join my team, right? You have to train them on what is professionalism, right? And that's what we're seeing now. It's not a matter of, is this player developing? It's, you're getting paid, you have expectations. And that's it in a nutshell. And one of the things that we're going to see a shift, and this is a paradigm shift in college football, is that it's no longer, and guys, correct me if I'm wrong, it's no longer necessarily about development, because you're going to see there is some development in there. But if you've got a freshman that you're paying $200,000 to, they don't want to hear about development. They don't. You have to go out there, and if you don't, then you're on to the next gig. And Bryan, you've seen this in recruiting, right? The kids wanting to get paid, but they better realize there's expectations that come with that.
Oh yeah, they often talk about. It's no longer. I very rarely do I hear someone say I'm looking at this school because of tradition, or you still hear a little bit. I'm looking at this school because of a coach. I'm telling you, 90+% of the kids that I talk to are, I'm going to go to a school that pays me the most. It's all about the money right now.
Yeah, and
I can't blame them.
No. So for those who aren't familiar with the podcast and aren't familiar with me and the way I think, I have one rule when it comes to coaches and athletes: secure the bag. That's it. That's the rule. That's, hard and fast. And I'm one of the few people. It is a Pandora's box. I'm readily to admit that. I readily admit that. But, for too long, and this is actually probably a whole different podcast, but for too long, the universities and the coaches generated all this revenue on the backs of the players, and the coaches were free to up and leave when they wanted to. So I'm all about that. But Jeb has a valid point. Just wait until some hotshot decides to hold out the Monday before a big game. And what the other thing people have to remember, guys, is, and I'm not gonna pick on him, but Larry Marley, the quarterback, is not the one doing the negotiating and the talking. Larry Marley, the quarterback, is probably fifth string, but that's neither here nor there. But he's got before you had the legal side of this, you had handlers, right? And so now Larry's handlers think, as Jeb says in the chat, hey, we got this Gasparilla Bowl coming up, and I'm scheduled to be a 6th round NFL draft pick, and I'm just making all this up. I don't really want to play unless I have to, but if you grease my palm, I might play. And I think that is.
But that's already going on, guys. That's already happening.
It is, 100%. But it's just now into the ethos. I mean, it's just into the ethos. But Bryan, you bring up an interesting point about players wanting to get paid. When all this broke, guys, we talked about this and we said, you know what? The teams that are going to do the best with this are obviously, once you get outside of the endless cash, right? Like the money printing factory in Tuscaloosa and the money manufacturing center in Columbus, Ohio. It's going to be about location, viability of the businesses in that location, proximity to big businesses. And I said that Memphis would be one of the schools that would benefit greatly from NIL because we have proximity to a lot of money. And I had a couple of people say, oh, well, it's not going to be that big of a deal. It's a big deal.
It's a big ass deal.
There's a lot of money floating around football right now. And it's oddly enough, one of the schools I mentioned that would probably be hurt the most is our opponent week after next. Somebody like Troy. Has nothing to do with how good of a program they are, has nothing to do with how good of a coach they have or don't have. There's just no money. They just don't have the cash. They don't have any.
There's nothing there. Troy's a beautiful area, but there's nothing there.
It's a void. And, Bryan, but what I do wonder as we talk through this is, obviously with the money situation, do you feel like, because this is how I feel, does this bring Memphis closer to the mid-level SEC schools, like in terms of money, like what Memphis can offer? Is it comparable to like Mississippi State, Kansas State? I'm just picking teams out of thin air here.
Missouri is probably a
no. Missouri's got so much money they can't see.
Yeah.
Missouri,
I wouldn't say mid SEC, but they wouldn't be at the bottom, for sure. And because of the opportunity, the 3-star offensive lineman Sam Browder, who just committed not too long ago to Memphis, he told me one of the biggest reasons, other than Jeff Myers, the offensive line coach, that was the biggest draw for him. But second, it was the business connections. He wants to have a business degree, and just all the businesses that are in and around Memphis excited him. So obviously his goal is the NFL, but he has a backup plan. If he doesn't get to the NFL, obviously he wants those business connections, and Memphis has them.
Yeah, Memphis has those in spades, and it's not just. I mean, it is obviously it's a lot. FedEx. I mean, that has a lot to do with the international paper has a big presence here. Like you have a lot of opportunity here for someone who, let's say they're a 3-star and they might be a bit undersized and they probably aren't going to make it to the NFL, but they can come here, graduate from college and end up with a college degree and end up with a foot in the door at a place like FedEx. And Larry, you played. What would you have given? Just let's take it back in time to the 1940s when you played. What would you have given to be able to go to a school, walk out the door with a degree, and basically walk into a job?
That's the ultimate, right? Is if you look at it's the Brady White model, right? Because that's what Brady did. He walked out and walked straight into a job. Now he ended up wanting to go back to football. That's fine, but that's ultimately what you want from your college education is to walk straight into a job. And I, I you asked the question of me, like it was tough. It was tough too because Cookville is in the middle of nowhere, sort of like Troy, and so there's not a lot around. So the closest is Nashville, right? A lot of kids went back to Nashville, but it's tough. And you're right, John. That's so being in a big city where you have, especially if you're an athlete, you have access to people do not understand the importance of those summer jobs. And I on our show, John, way back in the day when we first started, I said one of the things that helped Memphis was we all of a sudden had a fully funded off-season program, which Brian we didn't have until Justin Fuente. That made a huge difference because now all of a sudden not only are the kids getting paid, but they're making connections. They're making contacts within the city. And you saw, and here's a hill I'll die on to rob from Jeb. Here's a hill I'll die on. That was the beginning of the turnaround of this program. If you go back to that fully funding that off-season program, our program has grown in leaps and bounds every year, and that was one of the big turnarounds.
Yeah, and that's kind of it's kind of a double prong thing for me. That was one, but obviously, Brian, yes, the kids want money, but it is still a relationship game for these kids with coaches. Mm-hmm. And being able to keep and retain coaches is probably 1B to what helps your football program grow, because Sam talked about it. Other kids I've heard talk about it. Even after they've been here for a while, they'll say, hey, I only came to Memphis because I had such a relationship with Coach Clark or Coach Cramsey, whatever it is. Like a lot of people thought Seth was going to leave when Kevin Johns left, but Coach Cramsey came in and built that relationship with Seth. And that's I think the thing that people kind of underestimate when they just holler, well, the offensive coordinator sucks, we got to let him go, or the defensive guy can't coach, or whatever nonsense gets yelled about by man yelling at cloud. It is still, even though, yes, it's about money, but it is also about relationships.
Yep. Yeah, it is. And, if you have that close relationship, it's easier to retain kids. And obviously it's easier to recruit kids when you have that relationship. And it's it goes hand in hand, money and relationships. Now, if I had to pick, I would say money is number one, but 1A, but 1B is that relationship. And Memphis is in a great spot where they do have money. They don't have obviously the most money, but you have money that they can spend, and you have the relationships. This staff, I think, has done a fantastic job with the relationships. And when you listen to kids talk when they commit to a school, I mean, they all basically generally say, "Oh, this made me feel like home." But to me, you sense something different with the Memphis kids that commit to, or the kids that commit to Memphis than other schools. There's just more enthusiasm, just more excitement that I've seen. And I'm not trying to be biased or anything because I'm not from Memphis, Joycey. So, I'm really, really excited about where Memphis is headed and where they're at, and I know in future episodes we'll talk about expansion and things like that, but being the best G5 right now is a fantastic spot. Is SMU? No one's talking about SMU going to the college football playoff this year. No one's talking about UCF going to the college football playoff. What about Houston? No. But a lot of people were talking about Memphis going to the college football playoff. And that's why I think being the best of the G5, that's pretty good, a sweet spot. As long as there's access, top of the G5 ain't bad.
That is I have two. Well, I have a lot of good memories from the Justin Fuente era, but I have two, one terrible and one great. And he made a comment when somebody asked him about that sort of thing. He said, we can't be Coke or Pepsi. So our job is to be the best Sprite we can be. And, I thought that was very profound. And of course, this is the time before, the 12-team playoff or whatever. But I always thought that was pretty profound and a great way to look at things. Would more money and more access be nice? Sure, that would be great. But would I rather be competing with three schools every year? But you got schools like Boise, App State, Memphis.
Which, by the way, Boise and Memphis should play every year. That is something I know that's tough to do, but it absolutely should happen.
Yeah, but I mean, so you look at that and you're like, all right, would I rather do that or go be, even like the whole SMU?
And I'll play Appy in a phone booth, by the way. You bring them the hell on. Okay.
The SMU deal was so weird because they're not even getting paid. Like that's the whole part of that I couldn't figure out. They're not even getting the TV money. They just wanted to get the hell out of Dodge, which is fine. Again, go get the money, whatever you want to do. But I think, Bryan, that's a great point that, nobody, after week 0, SMU played Nevada. Nobody's going to mention SMU the rest of the season. No one cares who Rhett Lashley is. No one cares. They're going to be
7-5, maybe
in the ACC, and no one. And God willing, UCF will be 0-12, and Houston will be, and the other one will be 1-11. They'll each be 1, and hopefully one of them ends up 1-11. But no, seriously, and no, like you said, nobody will talk about them. Are they cashing a bigger check? Absolutely, they're cashing a bigger check. Will that come into play at some point? Maybe. I still think there's just going to end up being a big 2 and everybody else going to be fighting for the rest. But, that's like you said, that's a whole nother show. But, you're right, Bryan. I think that there is a lot to be said for being the best of the G5. And before we take a quick step away here for just a couple seconds, this just struck me as very odd. Going all the way, circling back to North Alabama. They return, let's see, I looked it up. So they're returning 7 offensives. Their quarterback that played Saturday is a young man by the name of Ari Patu, who graduated. And let's start here. I am not disparaging the University of North Alabama, fine academic institution, I am certain of. This dude graduated from Stanford in 3 years with a degree in architecture. And he's at North Alabama. How does that even, and we were talking about this today before practice. So I was like, well, maybe, he's from California. So I'm fascinated. And I want to talk to coaches during the off season because I'm fascinated by that whole thing. And Bryan, maybe you can put some insight into this, but I'm so fascinated how a kid who is from Folsom, California, ends up at Stanford, graduates at 3 years.
Well, here's what fascinates me.
Picks up the phone.
He's obviously smart. Like, how is Florence, Alabama the best gig you can find? Like, look, nothing about sport. Great fishing, beautiful area, but wow. Like, how does that kid even know where the hell Florence, Alabama is?
But Bryan, I think I know your answer. I don't know this for sure, but I'm going to bet it's a relationship, right? It's either the kid knows somebody,
or the coaches,
Yep.
and opportunity. Coaches may have called up. I mean, that's how Memphis got. The speedy kid from Clemson. Back when Fuente was here. 4-star kid. Oh man, the name's escaping me.
Was that the running back?
Wide receiver? But yeah, he came from Clemson. But anyway, someone on the Clemson staff knew Fuente, called him up and said, "Hey, check out this kid. He's obviously can't take him here, but be a great fit for you." Boom, that's how Memphis got him. And probably 5 seconds after we ended the podcast, I'll remember the kid's name.
Yeah, I've always found that kind of oddly fascinating to me, like the whole relationship business. Because, like, for those who don't know, like Coach Norvell and Coach Malzahn, very close friends. Coach Silverfield spent some time in Oregon because obviously he and Dan Lanning coached together. He spent some time with him this summer. He went over to Arizona State, spent a little time out there with Kenny Dillingham. Like, these coaches all know each other, and they know, like you said, hey, I don't think he can play in my offense, but this kid can play at the FCS level. And I know you lost two quarterbacks left because they lost a 3-year starter last year off their roster. So this kid can come in and play. He's going to be smart. He's not going to cause any trouble. He's obviously going to be very good in the classroom. But yeah, it's probably a relationship, but that just struck me as being so wild. In Florence, Alabama. And again, that's not disparaging. Northern Alabama is one of my favorite parts of the country. It's one of the most underrated and beautiful parts of the South, but just so weird that he ended up in Florence, Alabama. Well, with all that being said, we're going to step aside for just a couple minutes. And when we come back, I put some things out on Twitter today. I'm going to get Bryan and Larry's hottest non-Memphis college football take, their best Memphis football memory, and their worst Memphis football memory. And feel free to drop yours in the comments. We'll be back in just a minute. You're listening to Tigers Tonight. And despite the look of that forecast, I would like to thank my good friend Eric over at memphisweather.net for providing our first forecast again this year. It's great to have Eric back in the house with us. It's like he and I were talking offline, just we hadn't had rain in a month. And, now the opening Saturday of the season, there's a chance of showers. I think most of it, not to get weather tangent here, will probably be, if it happens, it'll be Friday into Friday night. Saturday evening probably looks pretty good. So, Larry, I wanted to get your take on something. This is something that just popped in my head. I meant to ask Coach Cramsey about it today. So, for those who don't know, part of the side of the Liberty Bowl of Simmons Bank Liberty Stadium is missing. The press box and that whole central section is missing as part of the renovation. So, Simmons Bank Liberty Stadium, where like the wind gets in there and it kind of whips around and it gets a little crazy down the field. You can't always tell which way the wind's blowing. So I wonder how this is going to impact that, because you don't have that bowl effect anymore. You have more of a Chicago, effect where when you make a corner in Chicago, you have the wind tunnel. And I'm just thinking like, man, one of those good westerly southwest breezes comes, one of those 20, 30 mile an hour days. So as a player, is there any way, and we asked today, and the kids have been down there a couple times, and they said that was on purpose. We wanted to take them down there so it wouldn't freak them out when they ran out of the tunnel. But Larry, as a player, is there a way for you to prepare for such a drastic environmental change? Or as Coach Cramsey said today, he said, when we was long and 53 and a half yards wide.
So environmental does have an effect on the game. When it has to be pretty drastic to have a real effect. So rain and snow and those things obviously affect the ball and make it fumbles and stuff like that. Wind is one of those weird things that, so I'm old enough to remember 2003, Cincinnati, Gino Guidugli goes back, throws a pass, and the wind catches it, blows it up in the air. Memphis intercepts the ball and wins the game. Okay. The weird thing about the stadium as it is now is that kids are used to playing at home in this stadium a certain way. And now it's going to be different. So Memphis has got to make this a home field advantage for them. It is going to be weird because you've got the whole west side open. And so if you have a westerly breeze, there's nothing to block it. And so to your point, John, like that's different. And you've got to practice in that and you've got to make it your advantage. And that's how you handle that. The wind is one of those things where you adjust for it. And you will see over the course of the game, wind is something that you can kind of adjust for in the course of the game. And so I don't think that's going to be a big deal. Now, what is going to be a big deal when you've got a blowing rain out of the west? Now all of a sudden, that field is going to be, I think, wetter, and it's going to be more treacherous for the players. We're going to see that at some point in the next 2 years. That's my prediction.
So, Bryan,
Yeah, I was wondering which players or which positions may have the trouble most. Because, like, let's go to basketball.
Quarterback.
Yeah.
Quarterback number one. Quarterback, because he's got to find a window, right? But I will say this as a DB, you're trying to figure out where he's going to throw, and you're guessing about where he's going to go, and with the ball, and especially as a safety, you're trying to read the quarterback's eyes. That's tough, and the wind all of a sudden will take the ball 3 or 4 yards one way or another. It is different.
You guys are burying the lead. Like, we know he just won't say it, but we know who it impacts the most. It impacts Larry.
I don't want to talk about them
the most. And all kidding aside, I think that is the aspect of the game that I'm most interested to see how it impacts is the kicking game, right? And not just field goals, kickoffs, punts, anytime, because a lot of people, well, I don't know, many people have probably never been to Chicago, I'm assuming. But in Chicago, you have this situation. My wife worked downtown. We lived there. And she said it was so wild that, like, you would make a corner and the breeze was like 50 miles an hour, and walking down the other side of the street, you didn't even feel it. And then you make that corner and it's the wind tunnel. And, you know, when you lived up there, we lived outside of town. We lived in Joliet, which is 30 miles southwest. And when you
Mark
live out
Allstott country.
Right. And there's nothing to block the wind. And I think that's the case here is you get a good solid westerly breeze one day, and man, the wind is going to get in that stadium and it's got nowhere to go. And the other thing, the thing I'm not looking forward to, as thank goodness I'm not a quote fan anymore. God bless everybody's got to sit on that east sideline for these early season games. Whew, it's going to be hot, and then it's going to be cold because then I do think the conditions are going to have an impact, but I think, as you said, Larry, I think this is where Memphis can make it a home field advantage for them. Look, the other team comes in here 2 days before the game. Memphis is going to be there 7 times. So, you know, I think
practicing in it too. That's another thing, right?
Yeah, so, I think they'll, you know, I didn't ask, but I'm willing to bet they'll practice, especially on quote weather weeks. They will probably practice there a little bit more because it gives them the opportunity to kind of get used to it. You know, I've always said with the rain, that favors the offense because the wide receiver, if the coaching's right, the wide receivers know where they're going. The defensive backs don't. The running backs know which hole to take. A couple more notes from talking to Coach Cramsey today. You know, I asked the question about has anybody stepped up or surprised you? And I got the coach answer, D'Angelo single season record this year, that's his personal goal. That's what we figure. I think it's like 2160 somewhere through there. That single season, D'Angelo carried the ball 310 times that season. Mario Anderson's not getting 310 times.
Nobody's gonna.
That's not a knock on him. But we talked about what makes Sutton Smith such a great player, and he said he's so dynamic, and we get him the ball. We can get him the ball in so many different ways. He
might get 2,000 all-purpose yards.
Yeah, but he's not running for 2,000 yards. He also singled out Bryan. I thought this was interesting. We talked about all the tight end we lost. He calls him Anthony Lampshade, which I find pretty funny. But he said that he and Doyle are guys that they just go to work. They don't, they're not out there jumping around dancing. He said, Lance Fear will be in this facility in the next 10 minutes playing over at the Jugs machine, catching balls. They've improved their blocking. I think and now under Ryan has been such a pivotal part of the offense. I did find it interesting that and he wasn't prompted about tight ends. He kind of singled them out. I think that's going to be interesting, as you like to say. It's going to be interesting to see how that tight end factors into this offense.
Yeah, and we'll see if that's going to be a factor in game one. I'm not sure how much they'll obviously display week one. In my opinion, I think it'll be more vanilla and work on the skills and technique more than anything else, instead of showing trick plays or anything like that. I just don't know how much we'll see of Lanphier this game. We'll see. Going into conference play, I expect him to see him more than what we'll probably see tomorrow. See this weekend.
I wish it was tomorrow. So
Yeah.
And Larry, you can chime in here. I know, right? We can't get there soon enough. I'm looking forward to I want to talk about this a little more, but I'm looking forward to Thursday and watching Colorado get their brains kicked in by North Dakota State, because they broke the number one rule of week one. As Nick Saban said, you never don't schedule anything with Dakota in the name. Never. Not week one. None of them. North, South, state, not state, doesn't matter. We talked about this a little last week, but going in, Larry, I would think is from a coaching perspective, there are two schools of thought. Number one, well, first and foremost, you don't want to get anybody hurt. That's that's your first. It's like NFL preseason. Just get the guys out there, get them through some reps, and get them off the field. But as I'm thinking through this, you don't have to show anything, especially against a team like North Alabama. But Larry, is there value? Not really even for Troy, but for conferences, this is a dumb analogy, but one of the plays I love to run in College Football 25 on Xbox is that little stupid jet motion fake handoff, where you just bring the receiver and jet across the formation, and give it to the back on his own outside zone. So I'll run that 20 times in a game, but just one time I'm going to do the pop pass, and it almost always goes for big yards. So is there maybe, I personally think you're going to see a lot of inside zone read, maybe some RPO stuff, a couple deep shots, and we're going to get the hell out of Dodge. But is there some value maybe, Larry, in saying, when we come out trips, you got to watch the weak side reverses. Is there some value in that, or is it the risk is too great? Is it a risk reward calculation you have to go into as a coach?
If you are planning, let's take your jet sweep for example. If you're planning to run some jet sweeps in the year, there is absolutely nothing wrong with showing that. You're to your point, putting things on tape isn't always a negative. Okay. You don't have to surprise somebody every week. What you want to do is you want to show that jet sweep out of a certain alignment, and then when you play them, show that jet sweep out of a different alignment. Does that make any sense? And so what you're doing is you're throwing the defense off. That's what you want. You want the defense to be looking at. I'll give you an example. We played EKU, and they ran out of basically a T formation, and they came out against us and ran a split I. And it's a subtle thing, but it changes everything, because now all of a sudden you're not a strong right, you're strong left. It's a whole different scenario. So you're defensively, you're thinking. That's what you want to show. You want to show that jet sweep, and you may show it out of a formation. We got two wide on each side, right? Balanced formation. And then you come out and you run against Troy. Now you're going to run it with trips. Well, now your defense is going, oh, shoot, we don't know exactly when. You know what I'm saying? So that's to the point. You put something on tape, but then you run it out of different formation.
that is one of the things I think that coaches, because when we had Gabe Kuhn on a couple years and we were talking through some game tape, and this was one of the knocks early on Ryan was when Memphis would come out in a certain formation, you kind of knew what was coming. And that's changed a lot with Coach Cramsey. Is like you said, we may run it out of, 2 by 2. Now it may be out of 3 by 1. Now you got a guy like Sutton Smith. You can put him in the slot and bring him across. And now, so when you see Sutton Smith come in the game and go to the slot on the heavy side, now you're thinking, and it's little things, like getting back to the video game analogy, there is a massive difference. There's just a huge difference in how those two formations play out.
Yep.
And it does come down to little things. It comes down to subtleties. It comes down to things like, when the quarterback lifts his leg, does the same guy go in motion every time? And Bryan, you've done a couple of great articles about this. And like in the weather enterprise, people use models as not forecasting, but trends and tendencies, right? Like they may see a storm 9 days out, but it's shown up on the models pretty consistently. So now we need to pay attention. Same thing with what you talk about with trends and tendencies. What does Memphis tend to do on first down? What is the trend on second and more than 4? And I think that's what you have to be careful of. And Larry, you bring up a great point. You can't, because predictability is the great equalizer. If we're all predictable, we're going to have a problem. And I think Memphis has done a better job over the past couple of years of being less predictable in those situations.
I mean, I'm not sure where we fell for 2-3 years under Ryan, but I will say this: we could sit there and watch a play as they lined up and go, okay, we're running to the left. If we can do that in the stands, the coaches can do that. Here's the problem. You don't want to do a whole bunch of wild stuff that you haven't practiced. What I think Cramsey's brought, and you guys can speak to this a little better, Cramsey has brought some unpredictability about when we do certain things. We would know we were going to run on first down every single time, and now Cramsey's going to come out and he does a play action pass, and you're like, oh, okay, that's different. He threw some screens last year, which I know is Bryan's favorite play to ever run.
Yeah.
And I'm for him too, by the way. But here's the bottom line, guys. What you want to see Saturday is us line up, run our bread and butter plays, and run them well. We don't want. Here's what I don't want to see. I don't want to see a bunch of procedure penalties, holding. I don't want to see defensive holding. I don't want to see defensive offsides. I don't want to see any stupid penalties where we're hurting ourselves. If we see that, then you're going to be like, wait a minute. We don't want turnovers, things like that. We want to play a clean game. I want to see the starters play a good first half, go into halftime, come out, play a series or two, and get their butts off the field. That's what I want to see.
Yeah, I'm shooting for consistency, Bryan. I think that's, if I had a word of the week, it's that, and you brought that up. It's about being consistent. And, I said today, I was talking to Frank Bonner and Jonah before at practice day, and I said, my dream scenario with this is that Seth Hennigan doesn't have a helmet coming out of halftime in a good way. That he's basically in shoulder pads, and he's.
I will say this: it's important.
He might be a little bit better.
Well, it's important that your starters do play right after the half, because that's tough. Like, one of the things you don't do in a scrimmage and you don't do in practice is you don't go in, sit, and then come out. Remember, it's really important that it's going to happen in a game coming up. Where we go in, we're down, and we need to come out and play well. You need to practice going in at halftime and coming out, and then having that intensity back up when you come back out. That's really important. That's something that you can't simulate in practice or scrimmage.
That's a fair point. All right. Well, time to kind of move to the next portion of the proceedings here. Of course, next week we'll have more to talk about because we'll have a game we played and a game we're going to play. But we didn't get together this summer, so we didn't do Mount Rushmore. We'll save that maybe for a bye week. I'm not sure ours have really changed that much. But Brian, I'm going to start with you. What is your hottest non-Memphis football take?
That Deion Sanders will not last the season.
Whoa!
Hey,
I didn't see that.
Man, it just got hot in here. Woo.
I was going to go Rutgers winning 9 games, but that's a pipe dream. So I'll go with the safer bet and say, Deion won't last the
Rutgers the first game of the season on Big Ten Network on Thursday night when the mighty Howard Bison come to town to take on Rutgers. I want to get into that. I want to get a little more into Colorado in just a couple minutes. But Larry, what is your non-Memphis hot take?
That a team not from the SEC or the Big Ten will play in the championship game. I don't know if they're going to win it, but they'll play in it. And you guys can probably figure out which team I'm talking about.
No, because but look, I will humbly admit, I'm really confused. Like, I'm having to look at web pages to see who's in what leagues this year. Because like I totally blanked a couple times that there's no such thing as the Pac-12 anymore. Right. So I have 2 hot takes. Jeb's onto something. I think Alabama's not going to be nearly as good. There's going to be a little bit of
I agree with that. That was my number 2.
Because you never want to be a guy that follows the guy, and as good of a coach as Kalen DeBoer is, he's not Nick Saban. So my 2 hot takes both involve, oddly enough, the Southeastern Conference. Number 1, Texas will lose 3 or more games. I don't think they're very good. I don't think they have a good coach. I think that's where my fault with Texas lies. I just don't think he's a good coach. I think he's a little better than Charlie Strong, but they're the same dude. Will play in the SEC championship game.
Whoa!
And if I were a betting man today, I would probably lean more towards our friends in Oxford. And it breaks my heart, but that's going to end one of my favorite trivia questions of all time, who is the only original SEC member to have never played an SEC championship game. I think, look, we're talking hot takes, guys. I think Mississippi has a chance to be fantastic. He's got it. He's finally got it all. And Nick Saban talked about this on game day. This is not a Rebels podcast, but I do want to talk about them because they're close. That, their problem has always been up front. They couldn't get the big guys. That's why they couldn't compete and all that. He's loaded this year. This is easily, if this is Memphis's best team top to bottom, this is Mississippi's best team top to bottom. He is absolutely loaded. And I just think one of those 2 are going to end up in the SEC championship game. So Larry, who is your pick to play in the national title game that we're not?
That you're not thinking about, right? They're going to come from out of nowhere, and it's Clemson. They got the schedule. Everything's lined up for them this year, and they've got a good team, and I think they're going to have an easy path to the. Well, I should say I think they'll play. Maybe I shouldn't say final championship game, but they'll play. They'll be in the semifinals. Clemson's got a really good team, and they've got an easy path. The ACC is not very good, and Florida State's not very good. Well, they're good, but they're not very good. And I just think Clemson's going to come, and they're going to upset a few teams, and they'll be in the semifinals. I don't know about the championship, but they'll be in the semifinals.
So we're going to circle back to Florida State before we wrap up. But Brian, give me your favorite Tiger football memory.
Oh,
for me, it was the Cotton Bowl. I mean, I haven't been. Some of you guys probably may say the first bowl that what was it, the Music City Bowl? No,
New Orleans Bowl.
New Orleans Bowl. But see, that's before my time. So since I've been covering Memphis, it's definitely the Cotton Bowl.
Larry?
Waking up, college game day, watching the drone go down Beale Street with all those crazy fuckers. Excuse my French.
Well, there goes the explicit rating on the old Apple podcast.
I'm sorry, but it's just true. Like the place was bat stuff. It was insane. It was. And I just remember thinking, because as I knew what it was going to be, like you don't know what it's going to be until you see it, and it was just. My wife Jennifer and I were just looking at each other. We were like, because we did not get up. The reason we didn't get up and go down there was because we had gone down the night before to kind of get a sense of it, and there were people already there. And I looked at her and I was like, no. And we had full plans. John, we tailgated with you the whole day. We had full plans to go, and I just told her, I was like, Jennifer, this is going to be insane. And so we didn't go. I do feel a little guilty about that, but that just it can still see it in my head, that camera going down Beale Street. It was just
I remember waking up that morning, and I had no plans to go. That was Beale Street's a young man's game on a Friday night at 10 p.m., much less 5 a.m. on a Saturday morning. And I remember being so adamantly against them doing it on Beale Street. I remember I was furious. Like, here's a chance to show off our city, our stadium. And I was like, they turn that camera on and Reese Davis starts. And I'm like, I've never been more happy to be more wrong in my life. Like, I'm getting chills just sitting here thinking about Reese Davis, his intro, and especially the part where he said SMU doesn't know what they have coming. And I don't think SMU knew what they had coming that day. But that still is second for me to 16th, 2003. At first New Orleans Bowl. And I knew it was special when I'm standing there and I look around. And if you've never been in the Superdome, it is massive. It is a massive stadium. And I look around, I was like, there are as many people here as there are at some home games. Like, I think the estimates are we took between 20 and 25,000 people down there. And I will just never, the parade the night before, like, I will just never forget that whole scene. Being able to cover the Cotton Bowl, I mean, dream come true, getting to sit up there and announce for the band in freaking Jerry World, where the room where I did the PA was the size of 3 rooms of my house. Like, are you kidding me? That's a close second for me. And game day is probably actually more so than the Cotton Bowl, because the Cotton Bowl kind of felt like the payoff. You know what I mean? Like, the SMU, the game day was kind of the big deal. The missed kick to get game day here, the poor kid that yanked that thing left, like, all that took. But the Cotton Bowl was like, it was house money. Like, what I'm saying? Like, after having game day and getting the bid and seeing Memphis's name flash across the screen on, New Year's 6, like, I was sitting there with a room full of people. I was like, it does not get better. Like, it's never going to be better than this. This is the penultimate. But yeah, the AAC title game, man, that whole season was magical. And it's really hard for me to just pick out one moment from that season. But if I had to pick out something from the 19 season when I knew we were in for something special, is when the kid at Tulsa missed the kick. Because people don't understand, you've got to have stuff like that happen for you. College football is a very, very hard game. And you've got to get a break here and there. You've got to have a ball bounce a funny way. You've got to have a breeze come up at just the right time. You've got to have an idiot kicker. You're welcome, Larry. Like, you have to have something happen.
And they're idiots.
They're not all idiots. That kid from Georgia Tech, holy crap! He had a 3 and a 59, and they both would have been good from like 70.
He wasn't an idiot in that moment. I will grant you. And the kicker for the Dallas Cowboys, Aubrey, he's the least idiotic kicker I've ever seen.
All right. So from best, I got 2 more things I want to cover here. From best to worst. We'll start with you this time, Larry. What is your worst Tiger football memory?
Oh, the problem is the list is long and And I
My
can think of 4 or 5, but I mean, I will always have to go back to Arkansas State and just getting shellacked. Hugh Freeze, a coach we passed over. Um, just that was for me, guys. That was about as low as it could get. I mean, that's just brutal. And I didn't go to the game, um, but I did watch it. I watched it for 2 quarters, and it was. I knew at that point that it was not going to work with Larry. It was not going to work.
Oh, I hate myself. I went. I sat there through 3 quarters until I couldn't take any more. Bryan, what's your worst Tiger memory?
Uh, for me, other than being Justin Fuente banning me from practice, if I can't use that one, I will. That's probably it. Is because I'm dumbfounded why I was banned because we went to him and said, what's your guidelines? What can we report on? What can't we? In his words, verbatim, just keep doing what you're doing. We'll let you know if you do anything wrong. All right. So we commented, so and so as turf toe, be out for a little bit, and some dude, I can't even remember the kid's name that was playing safety, moved to linebacker, and he flipped out calling me, and it's like you're giving a scouting report to UT Martin, and I'm like, what? I mean, if UT Martin is looking on our site for info, that's pretty bad, dude. And I was like, it was premium info. And I was like, no one from UT Martin is paying us for a subscription to Tiger Sports Report. I can see. But if it wasn't that, and Fuente, if you're out there, thank you for reinstating us, 3.5 years later when you knew we were leaving. But anyway, it was when Memphis played at Tennessee. I can't remember the year. Tommy West was the coach, and I think they just got shellacked. And I was standing next to R.C. Johnson, and just the look on his face. I mean, he looked lost and just dumbfounded. And seeing the Memphis fans in the background, I mean, my heart hurt for him. I was just like, man, I was like, it was one of the first few years of me covering Memphis, and I'm like, man, I'm not even a Memphis fan, and I'm hurting. Just seeing the facial expressions from that game, and I mean, I asked R.C. Johnson, I'm like, so what are you going to do with Coach West? And he just went, I have no idea, and he walked off. And I'm just like, well, I don't know if he should be AD, dude. I mean, it was just that whole experience. And I can't remember what year. I'd have to look up to see what year that was. But at that point, I was like, man, something's got to change.
So I have two, and Jeb mentioned one in the chat, and it's the one that strikes fear or strikes sadness in every Tiger fan.
I know what yours is.
4th and 27. Like we were in a bowl game. Like they were literally shaking hands in the press box. Memphis was going to a bowl game. And as we famously say, they figured out how to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. But my other one, and this is not, I promise this is not gang up on Larry Porter night, but my other one's kind of a weird one. First game of the Larry Porter era, the first series. First play, we get called for illegal formation.
Twice.
When we had too many men in the backfield. They call the same play again and get called for illegal formation. I'm sitting there. Yeah. And then there was a third one. I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh, we've made a terrible mistake. Like I didn't know how bad it was going to be, but I knew the next year or two was going to be rough. But man, that was just an absolute gut punch for me was that opening series, and to where I didn't ever want to see Memphis football fall to a place where they couldn't compete. And that was that was that place. They just couldn't compete. They didn't have the players, they didn't have the coaching, they didn't have the athletic department support, they didn't have anything. And I still, some people will argue with me, but I will still die on the hill that Memphis football was was very close to there were discussions about dropping down because there was so much frustration and so much, what do we do? Like you're talking about R.C. Johnson throwing his hands up, wandering around, as he called that Tuesday. But, he was frustrated. Everybody was frustrated because we felt like we had nothing to look forward to. I will still, as much as I enjoy the games at Arkansas State, I love having them. They're a good rival for us usually when they're pretty good. I'm not as fond of MTSU. I miss the Southern Series. Memphis should never be on the road at a CUSA Sunbelt school. Never. Like that just shouldn't happen. But that's another podcast.
I get Jonesboro. I do get Jonesboro because it's not far and
and what a cool little stadium. I say that a lot.
Cool little stadium and it's you're gonna have tons of Memphis fans there. So that doesn't going to Nashville sucks. Like there's
oh no, it's not even Nashville. You're not even fortunate enough to be in Music City.
Well,
you gotta go down 24 and be in freaking Murfreesboro.
Well, you're in Murfreesboro, but you don't have to go to Nashville anymore. You can just take the loop. But point is, it's not something that Memphians really look forward to. Hattiesburg, of course, my daughter goes there. Hattiesburg's a great town, and it's a cool stadium and easy drive. It's a little 4-hour drive, and when you get done, you're not far from New Orleans, right?
That's the best part.
But anyway, I agree with you. And UAB's a nice little. Now it's in a nice stadium, and it's got a little thing around it.
Well, and it's a conference game now too. So I just can't believe I'm saying those words out loud. But anyway, so the last thing I kind of wanted to touch on, I don't know if you guys saw this, but this kind of struck me in a not so good way. Sean Keeler, who writes for the Denver Post, he is. I hate to compare writers, but he would be almost like the Jeff Calkins of the Denver Post. He's been out there a long time. Not that Jeff, if you're listening, I'm not saying you. Well, you are. He can be a little abrasive from time to time. He can rub folks the wrong way. He wrote a column last week, I believe it was, where he had some very I think he called him Deposition Dion, the Bruce Lee of BS, which I just thought was a funny line. That's a great line. But in response to that, he is banned from asking questions at Colorado football events. I've got feelings on this. I did a TikTok about it. I got feelings on this. There's only one person, guys, that, obviously, Brian, you deserve to get thrown out of practice for reporting that, the second string safety had turf toe. And we ended up losing to UT Martin, by the way.
So, and I remember the article I wrote.
It's your fault, Brian. It's your fault.
All your fault.
It's not the 8-hour rain delay, okay?
Yeah, but there's only one person that looks bad when you ban people, and that's the banner. The banned don't look bad because now you have a guy who's got a platform who can say, hey, look, they can't take tough questions. And I have not mixed feelings because I do feel a certain way about this. An exchange just today, not to pull the curtain back too far, that Coach Cramsey and I had during the press conference today. I asked the question. The clip you heard earlier was the result of my question of, hey, you've got so many talented players. How have you guys worked out balancing, touches? Because everybody's going, these are kids. Everybody's going to want to get their touches. He looks at me and smiles and says, who told you to ask that question? And he wasn't being condescending or mean, but he was just letting me know that in his own way, he probably didn't appreciate that question very much. And that's fine. The basketball coach, Coach Hardaway, has been the same way with me a couple times, and that's fine. But I'm not getting banned. They're not throwing, when he was here, they weren't throwing Calkins and Giannotto out. They've never thrown me out. It's just coaches handle it different ways. And when you come in with the bravado that Coach Sanders came in with, where you had a fake high school academy that you should have gotten banished from coaching for having, you went to Jackson State, made all these promises you never had an intent to keep. You stripped that job, which again, good on you, cash in. I'm all for that. And you go 4-8. And then the first time and then he had that whole thing. I forget, which does he like? Is it he has to be called Coach Prom? He was addressed incorrectly and made this big deal out of it. And now you're banning guys like that. That's just really dangerous. Like that's just, man, that I didn't like that at all. I thought it was dumb. I think it makes them look bad. Larry, you and I know we had Coach Silverfield on the podcast a couple years ago, Bryan, and we were really hard on him about the East Carolina game that we gave away in overtime. We were rightfully hard, and he gave it right back.
I'll take it. I was 100%. I was, and I'm fine.
But he gave it back. And then last year, when I had questioned special teams earlier in the season, and again, this is totally unprompted, totally unscripted. At the Liberty Bowl, when they pulled that little trick play, I'm walking up just to say hello after the press conference is over. Like everything's over, the humdrum is over. I'm walking towards him. He looks at me, winks, and smiles, and says, "You like that one, didn't you?" That's how coaches should handle that. That's the right way. That's the right way to handle those things, is to, be professional. And he may not have even intended to, guys, but Coach Cramsey let me know that he didn't really, maybe not like the question. He maybe didn't like the way I phrased it, but he wasn't a jackass about it. And I'm not banned from practice. I haven't gotten that email yet where I'm not allowed back at practice because I asked a dumb question.
It wasn't a dumb question, by the way. It was not.
Well,
dumb.
I mean, I probably could have phrased it a little differently. Hindsight's 20/20, but that's how you handle it. You don't ban guys because you don't like being called the Bruce Lee of BS, which I think is a fantastic line, by the way. I'm jealous that I didn't think of that one. And Deposition Dion, that's another one. Those are great. And when you coming with that bravado and that whatever it is, you can't be thin-skinned. And it's a little surprising that someone who has had to struggle like Dion has, because when he came up in the league, yes, he was a lot of flash, a lot of dash, but he had a lot of doubters. Like, oh, this guy, what's the phrase they use in Texas? All hat, no cattle, all sizzle, no steak. Like, that was kind of the thought that people had about him, and he fought and fought and fought. And now, when you have this platform, you respond by banning dudes from. And the worst part is, they didn't ban him from attending. He just can't ask questions. It's the stupidest thing of the year. I mean, I realize it's week 1, but it's the stupidest thing of the 2024 season anyway. Has nothing to do with Memphis. Just felt the need to get that off my chest.
But I think, John, it goes to a sort of how do coaches interact with players, and we're seeing that unfortunately in Memphis, not with our football program, but we do see that especially with former athletes. And I don't think it's just everybody knows I'm talking about Penny Hardaway, but I don't think it's just Penny. Like we saw with Jerry Stackhouse. I mean, you're seeing that. We're seeing it. It is a tough thing when you are asking a legitimate question, and the answer is, well, you just don't know what you're talking about. Okay, but I don't have to have played in the NBA Finals to know that the zone wasn't working and you were up 6 and now you're down 12. I mean, I don't have to, I don't have to be a Finals MVP to figure that out. So right, and so that attitude we've allowed to pervade into athletics. It also manifests itself among the players that are there, and that's where it becomes an issue, guys.
Yeah, because I think everything trickles down. Right. I think your teams end up being, and we've talked about this, Bryan. That your teams end up being a reflection of who you are as a coach.
Yep, 100%.
On Josh Pastner we never knew who we were. if you asked 100 coaches, they didn't know who we were. And, Larry and Brian, you guys have talked about this with Ryan. You got to have, when the game's on the line, it's 4th and 4 from your own 43-yard line, or the opponent's 43, and you're down 4, and you're down 2, and you need a field goal. You got to have a play that you like. And
so we're going to talk about this next week, but it's a segue. I think Ryan knows who he is now.
I do too. I would wholeheartedly agree with that. Brian, what do you have on tap for TigerSportsReport.com?
Well, if everyone out there, if they haven't read one of the latest articles, we all gave our predictions, our bold predictions. Do you want to list them? You want to give ours?
Give them.
Well, my prediction, I have the great Seth Hennigan, that if he throws, I predict that he's going to throw for over 4,000 yards, and that would move him into 9th position all time in the NCAA. And he would be right behind Dylan Gabriel. And he'll throw at least 35 touchdowns this year, and that will put him tied for 16th all time, tied with Danny Werfel at 114. Think about that. A Memphis Tiger quarterback being a top 10 in all-time passes and top 16 all-time touchdowns. That's remarkable. I mean, that really is. And I'm on the verge. I'm so close to tweeting out that my prediction is Hennigan will get drafted by the New York Jets, and then I can just drive down the turnpike and see him play.
Quickly becoming a worst case scenario.
Don't do that to him.
This is becoming a worst case
Make
scenario.
it happen.
So, to your point with Hennigan, worst case scenario, Memphis plays 12 games. He plays 12 games. To get to that 4,000-yard mark, he'd have to average 333 yards per game. That's not out of the realm of possibility at all. I mean, I still think that's a pretty bold prediction, but please don't put that evil on him, Ricky Bobby. Please don't do it. All right, so my bold prediction was, and I will admit, it was a little clouded by the judgment, but I think Memphis is going to beat Florida State. And I'll tell you why I think that. I was stunned. Yeah, that's a great stat that Jeb just reminded me of. Like, look at this stat for a second. Between 05 and 14, Memphis had 17 different dudes play quarterback, and a couple of them weren't quarterbacks, but had to play quarterback. But, George, man, I don't want to talk too much about this. It's not Florida State, but Florida State around on both sides of the ball. They just whipped their ass up front. There's no other way to say it. Both sides of the ball. And I was stunned at what I saw on Saturday. And again, my judgment's probably a little clouded from that. But I think Memphis can absolutely score on Florida State. I'm going to regret this one, I'm sure. But by the way, it's not all one way, Mr. Moss. It's not always, if blame John if we lose. I get credit if we win too. I'm the backup quarterback.
I will give you the credit for that.
But yeah, their lack of preparedness on Saturday was it blew my mind to think that Mike Norvell is one of the best in-game coaches in the country. Being real, I was not surprised at the defensive output, because if anybody's watched Adam Fuller coach defense any length of time, that was not surprising or shocking. I just never really cared for his I don't like his schemes. I don't like the way he schemes games. Has nothing to do with him personally, nice guy, but just don't like his scheme. But when you get out physical by Georgia Tech, like, that's a blueprint. Like that's one of those games, Larry, you were talking about, putting stuff on tape. And Georgia Tech didn't really put anything on tape. They ran QB counter. They ran some zone stuff. They didn't do anything that major, but man, they just pushed Florida State around. And then on defense, poor DJU. I mean, that dude, I don't think he completed a pass over 7 yards, but I mean, that was shocking. But that's mine. I think Memphis is going to beat Florida State. I think it's going to be a close game. I've completely flipped on this, but unless something, I obviously want to see Florida State be a lot better, but I would like that improvement to start on September 15th. That's when I would like for that improvement to start. What's Larry's bold prediction?
And mine's way boring, but my bold prediction is that for the first time in the Ryan Silverfield era, we will win every game we're supposed to win without a nail biter. And that sounds boring because there's no shock in all of that. But you sit around and think about what I'm saying. Every game we're supposed to win is going to be a blowout.
And that I think would be the conclusion of what he talked about preseason, right? First year they lost games they should have won. Last year they won games that they almost gave away and found a way to win at the end. And now maybe this is the culmination of
like 2019, where we just went out and beat the crap out of the teams we were supposed to beat the crap out of. And that's
who was it? Was it Brian? Was it you on the board, or somebody mentioned about if Memphis loses Ryan Silverfield at the end of the season, that it may not be to a college job? Somebody said that.
I agree with that. You're muted. You're muted.
That was my absurd and downright crazy prediction. I wanted to think of something that is like, all right, this is just way out there. I had to throw something in there. And I was thinking about it. I'm like, if Silverfield, his Rolodex of NFL guys it's super large. And I'm like, he runs his program like it's an NFL team already.
That's not what he says is large, but
I just think I don't.
We're already.
I just think he would be a perfect fit. To me, he'd be a perfect fit. In the NFL. Not that I want him to leave it.
That. And I could totally see him taking an NFL job the way Chip.
Kelly. Chip Kelly.
Kelly.
Yeah, definitely not Chip Long.
I had Chip Long in my head. Sorry, but Chip Kelly took, backed off. I could see him going from a head coach to an assistant coach in the NFL. That's a different animal, and people, if you want to know why they would do that, read up on how it works in the NFL as far as you get your pension and all those things. So because he's in the NFL, he's close.
I still will die on the hill that Justin Fuente would be a fantastic coach in the NFL, because all he wants to do is coach football. He doesn't want to do all the other crap. Like, he doesn't want to shake babies and kiss hands. That's just not who he is. It's not what he likes to do. And I always thought he'd be a good NFL coach. So we'll close this out. I would be remiss if I didn't. It will be, let's see. I'm going to be very optimistic. It will be 8:59 p.m.
Yes.
On Saturday night at Simmons Bank, what's left of Simmons Bank, or 3/4 of Simmons Bank Liberty Stadium, Brian Moss, and the scoreboard will say
57-10 Memphis.
You stole my score. I was going to say 56-10.
I was very close to saying 0, but it's just in case it rains, I'll do a little slight adjustment for that. That's why I said 57-10. I was going to say 57-0.
Yeah, I think 56-10. I'll go with 56-10.
I'm just going to say 2 words: Bowling Green. 70-7, somewhere in that ballpark. Because this to me, if this were, this isn't a good FCS team, and this is what the coaches call a name your number kind of night. I think we're going to be in a situation in the fourth quarter where guys are going to be basically running halfback dive, and you're going to have guys score that I'm going to be digging through the press guide to try to find out who that dude even is. And that, that I just feel like that. I think that, Larry, to your point, this is a season where Ryan has to, and the Memphis football program has to step on people's necks. And when you step on them, you have to stomp on them. You don't just lightly hope to hold them down with your foot. You have to absolutely suck the life out of them. And teams like this, Troy will obviously be a much more stern test, but it's just a name your number. I'm hesitant on a score because, again, this a little bit of rain, you guys are probably closer to right, 52-10, but I just think this is a game that could easily get in the 60s or 70s, but that's also not really who Ryan is. He's not, I think we beat them 59-0, and I think that might be the pinnacle of what Ryan would do, because he has Duncan, it took you till the very end of the show tonight.
He's telling you it's time to end the show.
Waited till the end of the night, and now he's going to make a second pass. But this is what you get for being live, folks. No safety nets here. But no, I just think this is a name your number kind of night. So that's going to do it. Thanks so much for everybody joining us here tonight. Really appreciate all you guys and all the support. This will be up on Podbean tomorrow, correct?
Yep.
Right. So we'll have it up for you to subscribe on your favorite podcast player. Of course, if you haven't already subscribed to TigerSportsReport.com, feel free to do that. Also, subscribe to the YouTube channel, which you are probably watching this on, or follow us over on Facebook. We're everywhere, guys. We are, as Pitbull says, we are Mr. Worldwide. So for the best co-hosts in all the land, Brian Moss and Larry Marley, and our mascot Duncan, this is John Maddox signing off, saying good night, and we'll see everybody next week.